Welcome back. I hope you had your coffee. I warned you, it was the last one. So you still have a water fountain outside for later on. But I'm very happy now to welcome Maria Montaki, the chair of the Employment Committee Indicators Group at the Council of the European Union. And Maria will chair the next session.
Thank you very much, Christine, for your kind introduction. I am delighted to coordinate this panel number 6 of today, which is dedicated to discussions and presentations on perspectives on data needs on new and emerging forms of employment by 2030. Artificial intelligence, platform work, and algorithmic management are placed and will be placed high on the political and business agendas, given the rapid technological advancements and also the changing demand for skills, the need for regulating the working conditions and ensuring income security and adequate social protection for digital workers. Data collection and analysis of these trends are very, very important for evidence-based and proactive policy making to promote the benefits of algorithmic management for the increase of productivity and competitiveness of firms, and not only, but also to mitigate the risks of rising inequalities or possible labor market abuses. I would like also to share some information on the Employment Committee Indicators Group that as part of the ongoing works of the Indicators Group is the development of digital indicators related to digital employment and digital skills, with a view to better capturing the market trends in the ICT sector and identify also data gaps. MCOIG will further examine in the near future possibilities to include in the joint assessment framework, which is the main monitoring tool of the group, so to examine indicators related to platform workers. And of course, I am happy to say that MCOIG has a strong and close cooperation with Eurostat and the ILO, and it tends to have more cooperation in the future for its works. With this, I would like firstly to introduce our first panelist in our group, which is Elva Bova. Elva Bova is the head of the Unit Analysis and Statistics in European Commission's Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, where she manages a team of researchers and statisticians to bring forward the analytical agenda of the DG. She was also, in the past, deputy head of the National Fiscal Frameworks and Institutions Unit in the DG ECOFIN for about 3 years. Also, beforehand, she was an economist at the International Monetary Funds in the Fiscal Affairs Department, and she has also work experience as a senior economist of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. Elva, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the organizers of this very interesting conference. I'm pleased and honored to be here today to present to you the perspectives on data needs from the Directorate General of Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. So we are one of the main users of the data and statistics that you've been discussed over the last 2 days. We promote the development of indicators to use them to propose policies and further legal initiatives. So what I would like to discuss with you today is really, from our perspective, what the new forms of employment are and what we think should be looked at, related data needs with respect to new forms of employment, and then challenges that we see with respect to data collection of these needs, of this data. New forms of employment. So a lot on that has already been discussed. we talked widely about jobs in emerging sectors, particularly in the digital and AI context. In 2023, and this is Eurostat data, we had 9.8 million of jobs of people employed in communication technologies, information and communication technologies, corresponding to about 4.8% of total EU employment. We estimated that this number will increase to 20 million by 2030. With respect to another emerging sector, green jobs, which is a sector that has not been discussed so far, but very relevant for the Commission, we see that since 2015, jobs in environmental goods and services have increased by 18%. Having now meaning 2021, when we had the latest observation, 5 million jobs in this sector. And jobs in the circular economy have increased by 11%, reaching 4.3 million still in 2021. So we estimated that about 1 to 2.5 million additional green jobs will be needed by 2030. What are the challenges that these developments coming forward would raise? First of all, when we talk about the transitions, we talk about new jobs, but also job losses. And we need to be really knowledgeable and aware of where these job losses and job creation will occur. Green and digital jobs may require different set of skills, possibly adding also to the existing skill and labor shortages that we have documented quite amply in our recent Employment and Social Development report of 2023. And finally, green and digital jobs may not equally proliferate in all regions and sectors, exposing workers to the risk of being left behind. Then we discuss also about jobs in new forms of work. And as defined by Eurofound, these jobs relate to work provided on a discontinuous or intermittent basis, or for very limited periods. We are talking about novel forms of networking and cooperation for the self-employed, for example, freelancers. And we are talking about jobs conducted in workplaces that are other than employers' premises. Finally, and this is the main point that has been discussed over the last 2 days, clearly we are talking about new forms of work with a strong support from ICT, which has transformed working relationships and patterns of work. And in relation to that, what we see quite relevant as a policy implication is the possible deterioration of workers' employment status, also relying on opaque algorithmic management systems. We talk about this increased flexibility in the way we work and we operate, including teleworking, but then we are also aware that teleworkers may face inadequate working conditions, discrimination, and an always-on culture with repercussions on their mental health. So here I list, and I'm not going through all of these, different forms of new employment. We have digital gig workers, AI trainers, repair specialists, upcyclers, and clearly the list is not exhaustive, because if it had to be exhaustive, the chair would be very unhappy. So I have to stick with my time limit, and I will not go through all of them. Based on these new forms or emerging forms of work that we have captured, what are the data needs? So when it comes to the green and digital transition, we really need accurate and consistent data to measure and monitor upcoming and related work challenges. This implies standardized approaches and definitions on green jobs and AI work and advancements. And we don't have yet these standardized approaches and definitions, as it has been widely discussed. Then we're also looking at analysis on skills gap. As we mentioned before, we are talking about a skill set that is probably not there yet. So we really need to identify and measure the mismatch between current workforce skills and those needed in the green and digital economy. And finally, but again, this is not a final list or a complete list on the data needs with respect to the transitions, we need data on the adoption rate and magnitude of effects of AI and algorithmic management across different economic sectors and EU countries. When it comes to data needs for new forms of work, what we discuss internally is the need to adapt current framework to reflect emerging trends. while we see an increase in the gig and platform workers, this is not really captured by the data that we have now. So we need really to define indicators of self-employed, part-timers, temporary contract workers. At the same time, we are talking more and more about casual work, multiple employment, including in different countries by multiple employers, and subcontracting or other forms of outsourcing. As I mentioned before, teleworkers and challenges associated to that, to better monitor consequences of telework, data should also cover prevalence of remote work by country, by sector, employee productivity, job satisfaction, and mental health in remote and hybrid work environments. And then let me come to a form of work that is not new, but still relevant, which is the non-standard work. And it's relevant because a lot of new forms of employment are in non-standard forms of work. So to continue to capture that, we will need data on quality of employment, including social protection, safety at work, working hours, balancing work and life, security of employment. We will need also data on coverage and take-up rate of benefits, and then data on seasonal workers, domestic workers, trainees, among others, which are the most exposed to this non-standard type of work. To the right-hand side, we see the different types of employment as classified in standard and non-standard. And you can see that about 40% of employment in 2023 in the EU was non-standard. Temporary contract, part-time, self-employed, dependent self-employed, which has been widely discussed. So this is to give you a picture of where we are heading to and the data needs that we see. And so this could be our wish list to Eurostat, representing all the needs that the Commission sees and then would require Eurostat to work on. Challenges to data collection. So in the EU, we are quite fortunate to have quite a wealth of official statistics. The wealth is based on the EU Labour Force Survey, the EU Statistics on Income and Living Conditions, the EU SILC, the Eurofound Working Conditions Survey, and also probably not as known but quite widely used is the Commission's Labour Market Policy Database, which documents different policy measures with respect to the labour market. These data are indeed crucial and for us essential for policy work, for all the work that we do. So it's the bread and butter of our work. But we see some challenges or limitations in the official statistics that I believe the room fully shares. Official statistics have fixed number of variables and they require some time. It's not impossible, but it requires some time to expand the data set. Some population groups are difficult to reach, particularly in surveys. We are talking about migrants, not in population registers. We are talking also about collective households or situations of flat sharing. And then finally, if we're looking at surveys, there is a challenge with respect to the sample size, particularly if you're capturing very specific typology of work. So what we're trying to do is really complement this data with administrative linked data coming from ministries that can be used to enrich the information that we have. And I would like here to advertise a project that the Commission, DG Employment, is doing with the OECD on assessing the impact of active labour market policies on several indicators, labour market indicators, social outcomes, based on administrative linked data. Quite an endeavor as a project because we encounter issues of access to this data, due also to the GDPR, so to privacy policies, but also issues related to the comparability of the administrative linked data. Clearly, every member state would define specific concepts the way they want to. So that is a challenge. So what we consider as well, in addition to complementing official statistics with administrative linked data, is to get into the cloud, meaning to look at unconventional data. Unconventional data is all the data that you could find in the internet that could use to fill gaps in official statistics. This could be data gathered through web scraping techniques, using all the data that is online. Let me give you an example. We want to capture really movements of seasonal workers. Could we proxy them or could we check them through data on telecommunication network usage or financial transfers abroad? Again, this is not fully-fledged solution to all our problems because this data is difficult to access. Sometimes we need to pay. And also when it's free data, there could be an issue with the long-term stability of unconventional data. They change over time, so it requires continuous monitoring. But it's something that we consider in order to try to gather evidence using all possible sources of information. And I would like to finish with a quote, and you have only 52 seconds to read this quote, which I thought initially could be encouraging for those who are really working on the data, but then rereading it, I see that Scott Fitzgerald said that to collect the data for this work, it took him all his life. But anyway, for us, this data is extremely important, so an encouragement to all of you to continue with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elva, for your presentation. Now I would like to give the floor to Françoise Carré. Françoise, if you wish, you can stand as well. Françoise Carré is Statistics Program Director for the Global Research Policy Network VIGO, which means Women in Informal Employment, Globalizing and Organizing, and the Research Director for the Center for Social Policy of McCormack Graduate School of Policy and Global Studies of the University of Massachusetts in Boston. She specializes in applied labor economics and comparative employment relations, and she is also an author of several books related to non-standard and informal work in developed and developing countries, as well as retail job quality. Françoise, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I was asked to speak about a user perspective and measurement needs, which I will do without worrying about how you get the data. So just very quickly, another thing is remind me to change the slide when I don't do it. Just quickly to say that I'm going to say a couple of words about WIGOs because it's a bit of an unusual organization here. Talk about all the new forms of employment, recent changes, and the consequences for the need for measurement. I'll quickly mention a couple of not so new forms of employment that still need to be measured better. And also, time permitting, talk about a couple of emerging issues in countries where formal employment and the employee relationship predominates. So just on WIGO, as was mentioned, WIGO is a global research and policy network. There we go, see, I'm not doing this. Which focuses on informal employment in developing countries as well as developed countries. Because women are overrepresented in low-earning informal jobs, we pay particular attention to these workers and to gender differences in job status and working conditions. We are users of official statistics. We collaborate with member-based organizations of these workers and their global and regional networks who often come to us for information. So just to clarify, because informal employment has come up a couple of times in the past day and a half, but we haven't actually spent a whole lot of time on it. Just a quick shorthand definition. It entails jobs that have the lack of access to formal arrangements for labor, for the enterprise for which they work, or that do not benefit from the enforcement of formal arrangements. They may be independent workers, dependent workers, and contributing family workers. Informal status is a dimension that cross-cuts across status in employment and across forms of employment. So at WIGO, we have a stake in ensuring that international statistical standards and country practices enable us to better identify the status of the workers, their formal, informal status, the working conditions across countries. And of course, we have a stake in the implementation of statistical standards. Ourselves, we produce or we facilitate the production of analysis of employment levels and characteristics of groups of mostly informal workers. We do this at the national, urban level and major cities. And the publications are designed to be relatively accessible unlike a lot of other statistical work, and to help inform policy actors as well as the worker movements. And we pay special attention to several groups which are sort of large parts, not all of informal employment, but large parts in many developing countries. It's domestic workers, home-based workers, where a lot of women concentrate, street vendors, market traders, and waste pickers. So I provide no comments based on the experience of those workers, but actually I will talk about others as well. Just to say a general comment, for many of these groups, there are some data needs that are not fully met in country surveys. And I'll just say that at the outset because that's shared with other groups of workers. It's details on social protection, details on the nature and incidence of injuries at work. That's not always easy information to access. And exposure to hazardous condition due to weather change, and that's not surprising. A couple more things I just want to say as an introduction. Women are overrepresented in some forms of informal employment. In low and middle income countries, they tend to concentrate in the low earnings categories of informal employment. They're rarely employers. They concentrate in own account work and also as contributing family workers. The other thing that we see in our work is that there are some shared patterns of work, of forms of work across high-income countries and middle and low-income countries. Obviously, they're different economies, but there are some types of work that we see operate in very similar way. And also to note that also in high-income countries, women have tended to be overrepresented in the low-earning ranks of non-standard work. So changes and what are we looking at ahead? So it's been discussed in this conference that there are significant changes in the landscape, and there are likely more to come. Many more than even I knew when I first got here. The digital platform employment phenomenon has challenged the presumption of an employee relationship altogether. And this has happened in countries where the main form of employment was the employee status. And yeah, somebody needs to yell at me. Thank you. This is something I just cannot do well. And thank you. And this is unprecedented. I mean, decades ago, the staffing industry managed to split the payroll responsibility of the employer that rested with it and the supervisory responsibility for supervision that was that of the customer enterprise, but it never severed completely the employee-employer relationship. Other changes have occurred that also, we pay attention to. One is remote work enabled by information communication technologies, ICTs. It does not create arm's length working relationships per se, but it certainly does facilitate them. Also, the access to ICTs has facilitated the operation of one-person economic activities in all types of economies. What's still in question for us and what we think about is what are the business strategies and market demand that have fostered the growth of this form of employment, the one-person unit. And also we've talked in our other presentation about how inter-firm subcontracting networks have extended the chains, and at the bottom of those chains is an individual workers. So consequences and measurement needs. Some forms of employment can more accurately be measured thanks to the implementation of ICSE 18. We've talked about already a bit in this conference about how the dependent contractor category provides a way to measure how many workers operate in the status. It's a category that's relevant for the measurement of a broad range of employment. It is being discussed primarily with regard to digital platform employment, but actually it will be used for a range of workers, such as home-based workers in production subcontracting chains, or even contract farmers that raise poultry for retailers or food companies. And I want to note that access to work mediated through digital platforms companies is growing in low and middle countries as well. Obviously, we've heard about the interaction with platforms for the micro tasks that originate in global north countries and are performed in global south countries, and also for location-based work. But it also occurs in historically traditional jobs. in middle-income countries in particular, domestic workers now access their jobs through corporate platforms, which replace the role of conventional service agencies. But they also undercut the ability of independent domestic workers to find clients on their own. And over time, the household demand for domestic work services shifts to the platform so that workers no longer have a choice. Delivery drivers, we talked about. And again, this is work that in many cities had been organized locally, sometimes in worker associations, and increasingly is being channeled through platform work. So we know there will be definitely improvements once countries take up full implementation and measurement of dependent contractor status to get at some of these relationships. But we have a sense that measurement challenges will remain in additional challenges. Workers who access tasks through digital platforms can pass the work on to one or more other workers. This occurs even in the case of location-based in-person work, such as like ride providers do share the access to the platform. Home-based workers who are dependent contractors, those that produce on specification for an intermediary, pass on their work to others in the household. And in identifying these layers of workers may become a challenge. The labor force surveys, as you know, you do them, do not ask on what economic unit a particular job or activity depends. We know that's, we understand that's not easily doable, but that is exactly what worker organizations want to find out for their policy advocacy work. When the work is passed on to household members, it's often the family helpers. It's often the women and daughters in the household. They may or may not self-report as workers. They may not think of this as work, and they may be identified as contributing family workers. But even there, if a question isn't asked about whether they participate in decision-making and should be classified as a independent worker or dependent contractor, and if we don't ask them if they're paid, they could be classified as employees. We just don't have that information. So a word about a couple of not so new forms of employment that also still have measurement needs. One is home-based work, and I don't mean the remote work that is tied to the employee relationship, but I mean the people that are home-based and either as independent contractors, as independent workers, sorry, or as dependent contractors. Because we do analysis at the country level, we sort of run across challenges in the survey questions. Sometimes simply, as I said before, women are not reporting themselves as workers, or the proxy respondent doesn't identify them as workers. Sometimes the question itself about place of work, it has tremendous variety across countries in terms of how it's implemented. And in some countries, there's no distinction between the place of work, home as a place of work, doing work in one's own home or someone else's home is the same category in the place of work. And the ILO has done excellent work pushing for a cross-cutting variable and having very specific categories that would address most of the issues, but we're not there yet with implementation. The other one is a category of workers we don't often talk about, which is waste pickers. It's not a new occupation, but it's a category of workers that's coming much more, getting more visibility because they're tied to the green economy, and they're much more explicitly being considered as part of city trash collection system. And it's an occupation that happens in all countries. We have can collectors in New York City, and then we have workers that sort and sell workers. Where am I? Am I on the right slide? I can't see. This is the other problem, is that I'm too short to see the thing. And so they operate individually, sometimes as family groups, and sometimes in organized setup, but basically it's very hard to integrate them in labor force surveys because sometimes the place of residence, the residence varies, the work is seasonal. It's often a job particularly in developing countries where migrants land first because it's easy to start that work. It's not easy to live with it, but it's easy to start it. And so what we find in our work is that there are initiatives of what's so-called citizen-generated data to collect information about those workers. And the UN Statistics Division has started a collaborative on citizen data initiatives with partners precisely to examine those forms of data collection when official statistics are not in a place to be able to do it. Just to get towards wrapping up, I thought of just a couple of, we were also asked to think about emerging issues, which is hard to do because there's so much going on right now. But there's just a couple of things I thought about that are concerns for us. One is, we've talked a lot about digital platforms, but the thing, and about how it's not a big part of employment. But the issue that we see is, and that we've seen with other issues before, is the migration of a practice across other parts of the economy. So crowdsourcing, for example, I can give, where in the past a corporation might have hired its own workers or sourced out a part of its workforce to staffing agencies, or even use service contractors that have workers on their own payroll, they now have another option, which is to basically portion off a part of their activities and to organize it with crowdsourcing for the labor sourcing. So online order delivery by large retailers, for example, is one example. They do not necessarily want to, the retailers do not necessarily want to rely on driving app workers or on a shopping and delivery external company. They require more predictability than that. So for example, US leading retailer Walmart owns an orders delivery company which crowdsources all of its shoppers and drivers, and whose sole customer is Walmart. So that shifts the norm of what a delivery job has been at Walmart, which is basically these workers are now externalized to another company, but they also do not have employee status. So having some measurement of characteristics of those kinds of work, once they get embedded in other larger types of operation, would be good to know. A second type of changes concerns the shifting norms around total working hours. Now, in labor, particularly in labor-intensive service industries such as retail or food outlets, we've had a lot in the field discussions around unpredictability of work hours and part-time and that kind of thing. But what we see, at least in those industries, is a more recent trends around the erosion of the norm of full-time positions. So the norm for full-time now, the schedule is down to 32 hours that are guaranteed by the employer. But the condition for holding a full-time job is to work up to 35 to 40 hours when needed and as needed by the employers. So we know that the labor force surveys do measure effective work hours, and they also ask about regularly scheduled hours. But from the worker perspective, there's a difference between a 40-hour week or 35 or 40-hour week job and one with 32 hours guaranteed. I'm almost done. The full-time job with main characteristics, this is the problem, I missed this. The full-time job with main characteristic has historically been the predictability of hours and the predictability of earnings is now a job which in effect holds 20% of the hours and 20% of the earnings that are unpredictable. And that is a different form of employment that we might be interested in measuring. So thank you, and sorry for taking too much time.
Thank you very, very much. Sorry for having the obligation to interrupt in the end, but thanks so much for the information provided. So now we proceed with Rafael Diaz de Medina, who is the Chief Statistician and Director of the Department of Statistics at the International Labour Organization, as you know. Some few words from his rich CV. Rafael has worked for many years in the National Statistical Office in Uruguay in the past as the head of the Household Service Division. He has served also as a regional advisor in labor markets. At that time, he has served also as a special advisor to the Executive Secretary, Technical Coordinator and Director of the CLAC's Montevideo office. He has participated actively in the harmonization of labor and poverty statistics, jointly working with the World Bank and the Inter-American Bank in the MECOVI project, as well as in the Household Service Capability Program of the UN Statistical Department. Several consultancy services in different organizations. I cannot name now everything, we will run out of time. And as I said, since 2003, he's working for the ILO. And since 2009, he's promoted to Chief Statistician and Director. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I hope I cannot shorten my presentation because of that. I have already danced out because, of course, we are facing the challenge of being innovative in identify the data needs, and this panel was for that. And of course, from my side, I will try to be concise. And of course, what I want to share with you, of course, many things have already been said, and I don't want to repeat myself about this, but I would like to see from the global perspective how labor statistics are really prepared to inform these data needs that we need for this. We are very aware that their changes are hectic, and we have been hearing about this all the sessions that we have had. But I want to capitalize on and see this from in a holistic way, that how really this standard setting that we are all using are really fit for these purposes, and have been really, these changes have been taken into account with this standard setting mechanism. And the first thing that I must tell you is that I think that this standard setting has been really ahead of the times at the global level, seen from the global level. And I see this is a collective, I would say, achievement, because the tripartite consensus that we had of all these various standards that we are taking this for these emerging new forms of work are already done. And I think this is a good thing to depart from this in these discussions. In the last 10 years, we have managed to have the things that we have already heard about that. Of course, we have the first, the definition of work. That's something that everyone is now talk about, but it was not the case before. We broaden the scope of the former employment, and we go to the framework of work, and we narrowed the concept of employment. Then in the 20th ACLS, we adopted the work relationships that we have been discussing these days. And last year, we have adopted the focus on the informal employment and informal economy and informal work, which is important to also to sum up, because these things have been really proven to be quite resilient and how helpful in emergencies like, for instance, COVID-19, where the initial panic for all statistical office on how we are going to have unemployment rates were somehow appeased because the 19 ICLS had provided us some kind of different indicators that we could fetch in those moments of emergency. And I can be also very, very specific. I will not be, but of course, remote work, care work, there are things that are now highlighted that in the past were invisible. They are unpaid work, for instance, things that we capitalize on these standards that we have. This doesn't mean that we have everything, and this we have to fetch other type of standards in the future, but still we have to work on things that we have just heard about, the emerging, the 0-hour contracts, the multiple job holding, the temporary contracts, digital self-employment, the cross-border work, many things that the digital nomadism that we have not touched about, but it's there. So there are many things that we know that we need to focus. The conceptual framework for the 19 ICLS, which we have just seen in some of the previous presentations, the same thing, because this is coming from the manual. It's clearly for digital work. We have been helped by the 19 ICLS. Why? Because we have now the identification not only of paid forms of work, but also unpaid forms of work. And we could identify what is work and employment in a different way. So we could identify in these categories interesting things that probably in the previous discussions, we have focused on the circle, employment, because it's the more common in developed world. But in the developing world, we have also many things that are related to work and unpaid forms of work, and particularly the own-use production work. And these are also subject to platform work and things that we may need to have more information on them because of the different size of different development of economies. The 20th ICLS we have already seen. I will not repeat that, but this is key, or has been key, to also focus on digital work. In the end, the dependent contractor is a category that is key to understand many new forms of work, not only platform work. So this means that this standard that has been approved by the 20th ICLS was quite key in highlighting and helping the process of shedding light in this kind of impossible task of moving target where we have that to face the new forms of work. I also draw the attention, because we have focused a lot on the different categories of the different type of authority or type of economic risk. This is crucial because it's the control, and we focus on digital work. But for other forms, the indicators framework that this standard carries is also very useful, and it's also something, a road ahead that we have in terms of data production, and I think there are challenges. We focus a lot on the questionnaire design. We put a lot of emphasis on that, but it's as important also to think about the indicators framework that we will helping this. Then, and linking with what Francois has just mentioned, we come to the question: is informality a new form of work? We know that it is not, but the 21st ICLS focus their attention in all types of economies, and not only in developing countries as it was before. This standard has been it's relevant for all types of economies, and it is something that is clearly linked with the political track that we have at the global level in terms of the tripartite discussions around this. You know, there is a recommendation, Manuela Tomei mentioned this at the opening, is the recommendation 204. It says that it's transition from informal to the formal economy. It's a recognition at the global level by workers, employers, and governments all over the world that there is a need to move to formalization. Because of this, some emerging new forms of work are precisely going against these recommendations. And we have seen all the shades of uncertainty that we have in the work relationship in the forms of work that we have discussed these days. So we need for data and accurate identification because of this. And of course, the political interests cannot miss major trends due to preconception, and informality is not only present in less developing countries, and I think this is important. Sources. Which sources are needed to fill these needs of information? Of course, we have talked about labor force surveys intensively, but we know very well that we will need to have a variety of sources, and I will not repeat the discussion that we have just had. But it's not only for digital platform work, but all emerging forms of work. We need to have information from digital platform for sure. I think we have to put a lot of emphasis on that, and the new regulatory processes will help us to do that in the future. We need to have partnerships with them if possible. Establishment service and business service are key. We need to know why these type of emerging new forms of work are cost effective, because it's linked with productivity, and we have to have information about productivity as well. Why It's not happening because the bad business want to fetch the rights. No, it's a rational decision, and for that we have to understand. Admin registries and sources are key, and we have already seen that. There are new sources like big data analytics and machine learning and other AI tools, and there are documents on how arguments are designed. We need to focus on that. It's information that is needed to be digging into this. And the perception and sentiment in surveys that we have had, I think they are crucial to know exactly the type of information that we need. And finally, what are these frameworks and sources fit for purpose? I think the key issue is implementation. Implementation is still falling behind. We have seen that European countries are intensively using already these frameworks, but it's not the case of the developing world. And we need jointly to find the solution to this, because we need to have these three sets of standards applied widely in the world. And of course, then, yes, are these still standards still relevant in evolving in other things? We need to focus on hours of work, earnings, OSH. We have already standards there, but we have to also apply it to this. ICSE helps, as we have seen, on the complexity of the platform. The 19 IC laws can help us for other purpose, for instance, for care work and the new forms of care work that are there. But there should be more adaptable. They should be more, I would say, often updated. We have to find mechanisms that they have to be agile. Of course, we know that there are costs, but the quality and the availability of these various sources are very different. And of course, we have biases in these things. I don't want to dig in that, but there are important studies that provide us information that the lack of trust is linked with the lowering response rates. So we have to dig on that and why precisely probably those that are not answering are those who are participating in these new forms of work that they are being captured. The classification of occupation, the need to have formalization on platform, not only platform work, as are we going to do, but also on remote work and other forms of emerging works. And anyway, I just finished with the data gaps that we have for policies that are in the end our final users. We need to know more on conditions of work. We have seen good examples today, but we have to do this in developing world. It's crucial to know things about job, work-life balance and many other things. Mental health was mentioned, and I think it's very important. Productivity, again, is crucial. Skills anticipation, labor rights, so particularly collective bargaining and dispute resolutions are key. And I think we have been advancing as well in definitions, but of course, for this type of new forms are not there. We are not there. So just a glimpse of what are the things that we would need, and with this I finish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rafael, for your presentation. Now I would pass the floor to David Arnoldsen, who is a senior officer in analysis and risk assessment at the European Labour Authority, working at the Enforcement and Analysis Unit. He started at the ELA beginning of this year, having worked before as a lead data scientist at the Netherlands Labour Authority. David, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to start to thank the organization, Eurostat, and the ILO for the invitation. I'm very happy to speak to you as the data user, as Ella. And it was already a very interesting conference to hear how much work is being done also on types of work and employment that are very relevant to the work of Ella. And that will be the topic of my talk today. So, the ELA, to tell a bit more about ELA, the European Labour Authority. If you don't know, we're quite a young European agency, so don't you worry. Actually, we last week celebrated our 5-year anniversary, our lustrum. And I'm working in the analysis and risk assessment team, which has only been at full capacity this year. So you can imagine in terms of data and analysis, we are really at the beginning of working, but we work in close collaboration also with the, for example, the director, the DG Employment. So in short, the European Labour Authority, we assist Member States and the European Commission in ensuring fair and effective enforcement of both labour mobility and social security coordination. So it means that we are based on one of the pillars of the EU, which is free movement of workers and services. And we try to remove barriers that are barriers that are between an easy labor mobility for workers and employers alike. And we want this to be in a fair way. So we work a lot with labor authorities in national member states to help them work, especially in cross-border cases, to ensure that labor laws are being applied and that people are being treated equally in a fair labor market. So the authority has a very operational side, so we have people that assist labor inspectors with inspections, especially with cross-border inspections, and as an analytics team, we also support that with analytical support to these concerted and joint inspections, as we call them, CJIs. But the strategic analysis, among other tasks, is what's more interested of today, because we also use, we zoom out, we look at trends, and that's where we use the data that we've been talking about a lot, especially the EU LFS data set. And here we focus on sector-specific challenges, recurring problems at national and both EU level, and also more focused in-depth analysis for issues that are being found, actually. So here are 4 examples of strategic analysis we do. So I'll talk a bit more about the HoReCa report. So aircrew enforcement. So the aircrew, you can imagine, has is by nature very cross-border. So this is very interesting from the perspective of ELA. We are also dealing with third country nationals, TCNs, when they are, for example, posted across EU member states. And another aspect is social security coordination. And now, there we are again, which means that the social insurance by an employer that works across the border should be coordinated among member states, because every national member state has different social security rules, but there are EU directives on the coordination of these social security rules, and we guide with that, we help. So let's see. Now, the data source we use, of course, the LFS is one of the main and most valuable data that we have in this respect, because it's all of Europe that is being served. We use other data from Eurostat. The structural business statistics is one example. And then you can already see there's a list of voluntarily collected data. So in this sense, this is one of the disadvantages we have in terms of data, that some of the relevant data comes through us, not through a mandate, but we collect it voluntarily. And the first 2 ones are mostly about posted work. So what workers are posted. So it means that employers can send a worker temporarily to another EU country to work there on a project, for example, a construction worker from Poland who works on a project in Germany and then comes back after a year. That's posted work. We get information about this, and we also get information about social security coordination through administrative data. But you can imagine a lot of the data that is relevant for us is stored in national member state, and to get all the data from different member states is of course a challenge. So the types of employment that are relevant to ELA is basically all types of employment that have a cross-border aspect, and the new types of work are mostly that we focus on in the coming year is telework and platform work, and then I mean especially online platform work, in contrast with on-site platform work, which would be like Uber and those kind of platforms. So both of these are digital in nature, so they tend to be very cross-border, or they don't care much about border. You can work, you can do telework, of course, from another country. It doesn't really matter. But it does matter very much for those, especially for the social security rules that are in place, and the labor laws that are effective for the worker. So this is, of course, a challenge. It's hard to measure because it's a small group. Most people don't work cross-border. It's a dynamic group because we have, you can be a cross-border worker during the season, for seasonal work, and then come back, or a posted worker. So you temporarily work in another country, then you come back. So it's a very dynamic group, and it's diverse, and that makes it also especially hard to measure, because you can say cross-border worker, but it can be a frontier worker, someone who lives close to the border and works just across the border. It can be a posted worker, seasonal worker, teleworker, or possible combinations. This results for us in a quite limited information position, because we would like to distinguish all these subgroups, but we cannot always do this. And that is because the analytics, the reporting, then has to be on a higher granular level than we wished for. And so one of the things we resolve this is also to build our own data sets. And these three issues I would like to highlight with a short example. One is the flagship Horeca report that colleagues of mine worked on, where we would like, this is one of our strategic reports. We're focused on the Horeca. This is a sector where a lot of cross-border work is being done, and also a lot of migrant workers, or workers, mobile workers, I should say. Here we use the data set that I talked before, and especially when talking about LFS, we see some issues when it comes to cross-border work, and that is that on the one hand we can identify, so it's being asked what is the country of place of work, and we can, of course, contrast this with the country of residence. But what we miss is one step further. That is like, what is the frequency of commutes, for example, because one could be a frontier worker. What is the underlying employment relationship? Is there like a posted worker type of work, or is this a fixed work contract? Or is it self-employed? And also the share of work outside the country of residence. So that does is quite the same as the frequency. So we, especially for Social Security, we would like to know the percentage of work that's being done outside the country of residence, because this is a very important point. Then the second one is we build our own data. We'll be very quick about this, because this is this will be done in this year. It's together with Eurofound. We will collect data on online platform work. For us, it's mainly interesting to see are the people that work in online platform work, what is the information? Do they know what their rights are? Do they know what the issues are when they work for example, for a cross-border platform from a different country, and also for oversights. And we like to gather more information on working conditions, especially for Eurofound, but also on social protection coverage. And here we'll talk this in a minute why this is important. And also we would like to know more about the information, to see if we, for example, do people know about the consequences of working for online platform work, and how much are national member states aware of the number of people that work on these online platforms. And this can only be a limited scale for us, because we would like to assess the whole population of the online platform work, but this is of course out of the scope. Then the third point I would like to highlight is this is more about social security coverage, which is a whole topic on itself, quite complex, quite legal. So I won't go into this too much. But what is important is that the physical place of work is in the regulation that deals with social security is very important in setting the country that sets the social security rights, where the worker is insured. If this is larger than 25% in the basic regulation, then there's, for example, cross-border work more than 75%, then this gets to be an issue. But after the pandemic, when telework really lifted up, there was between many member states made a new framework agreement on this, in which they allowed for a higher percentage of cross-border work. So you could still be insured in Austria, for example, and working in Germany up to 50% if there was like an agreement between the two countries. And it was expected to have a very high usage, but this turned out to be quite low. This framework has been in effect since last year. And this can have various reasons, of course: low awareness, it's a new rule, so passive attitudes among employers might be a reason, or uncertainties with respect to taxation. But we would like to get more quantitative view on this. And this is very hard because, as I told you, much of this data is on the member state level. And this is very hard to collect if they are already willing to give it to us. So we look then to the LFS, and there we have a problem that there's ask for homework, working at home for the main job, and also the country of place. But then homework is asked in a very quite a crude way, like a lot. You work a lot of almost none or something like this. And for us, of course, with Social Security, to link it to the EU rules and regulations, we would really like to see, is it 25%? Is it more than 75%? So in that sense, brings me to the conclusions. I'm almost over time. So we would like to really to have the data. We're very happy with the LFS data, and we use it a lot, but we like to have it even more on the EU mobility framework, so to say. So to have it really, to be able to view the data from this EU mobility framework, for example, in this percentage of working abroad. Another point is that we are, as I told, very limited in terms of data, so we are very reliant on this systematic data that is collected by Eurostat. And we hope that this, and with that, I would like very much to be in line with what Elva already said. We really appreciate the data, and we hope that the systematic data collection, for example, by Eurostat, is continued and also considered to be, to perhaps extended into, to be more fitted in the EU mobility framework, and to have a higher granularity, so that we, at ELA at least, can use it in a more diverse way. And with that, I'd like to conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. Now I will give the floor to Alexandra Preskalinska. Please, you have the floor. Alexandra is an associate professor and vice president of Kosminski University, responsible for international relations, as well as a senior research associate at the Harvard Labor and Work-Life Program. She is also the head of the Human-Machine Interaction Research Center at Kosminski University, and the leader of the AI in Management program, and she's also a co-author of Collaborative Society and Strategizing Artificial Intelligence in Business and Education. So, Alexandra, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Very happy to be here. I'm very sorry that I wasn't here yesterday, where I understand you had many discussions about artificial intelligence. So yes, we're going to come back to this topic at the very end of this session. And I want to tell you a bit about the project that we are running together with Harvard, with the Center for Labor and Just Economy, also in collaboration with MIT Center for Collective Intelligence. It's a project where we're trying to develop different types of assistants and AI helpers. And our attitude towards that is quite normative, namely we work in the paradigm of collaborative AI. It's a whole concept where artificial intelligence is not supposed to be delegated tasks to fully or replace humans, but rather work together with humans and achieve some sort of synergistic effects with humans. So I will try to show you some snapshots of the study, and we'll see how well we will do within the 12 minutes. I hope that it was 15, but yeah, It is what it is. We'll try. Okay, I'm going to show you a bit of the projects that we are currently running. We're doing sets of different experiments where we are checking for productivity of work, also satisfaction of work with different AI assistants, having in mind that AI is quite a flexible technology and it can be designed to work in many different capacities with humans. It can work in creative tasks to some extent as a helper, in routine tasks, in strategic tasks, maybe to a lesser extent, but it is a tool that can be collaborative regarding the task that you're doing, but also the pace of your work and how you would like to work with it. So this is something that we are doing. And we also believe that it is very much in line with this human-centric or human-in-the-loop attitude or perspective on artificial intelligence, what I think is quite relevant. People talk about it, but there is just too little research on this very topic, right? How to build human-in-the-loop AI. It's a virtue, it's a value, but regarding the real examples of it, I think we have far too scarce evidence at this point. And as you know, and I'm sure you've been discussing yesterday, we've seen unprecedented revolution, particularly when it comes to generative artificial intelligence. We've seen a big jump from large language models of different kinds. You have a plurality of different models today. You have models that are commercial, open sourced, research-based models, plenty of them. Some of them have become conversational models, and I guess ChatGPT is a very good example here, but Claude and a couple of others are too. And currently, we're also dealing with models that can actually express themselves in many different forms and modalities that can, express themselves through video, voice, but also produce images and graphics for you. So they have become eventually multi-model models or even omni models, because this is how OpenAI tends to call their newest ChatGPT edition. Omni model suggests that it would be able to communicate everything in whatever form. It also would know everything, which obviously is not true, but it's a good name. And then on top of that, what is quite interesting is we have large action models. These are different plugins through which you can build assistants and agents that are more specialized than a generic large language model would be. So if you want to compare, say, ChatGPT to encyclopedia, right, that is quite surface knowledge, right, and then can be queried on different topics, then large action models would enable you to build assistants with additional knowledge that would be more specialized in a given domain. And through prompts and also library of resources, these agents or assistants can be much more helpful in particular tasks, which I think in the context of work is quite an interesting thing. And I can show you one example. We've recently published a book, my colleague and I, Tamila Triantoro. We actually were presenting it here in Brussels 2 or 3 weeks ago. Converging Minds is the name. And the book is about collaboration with AI, but it has also been written in collaboration with AI, which by no means that the book has been generated. Quite to the contrary, we dislike book generation, and we think that whatever comes out is not a very good input and output, really. Instead, we decided to build ourselves helpers that could work on the initial draft that we have written by ourselves. And then we actually created or developed 4 different assistants in 3 different language models. One was a field expert that was, prompted to be skilled in machine learning and similar topics, and also would have a database of around 10,000 records, right? Like articles and books that it could query effectively. And some models are very good at that sort of query, and some others are losing a lot of content, right? So it's an interesting thing to try and navigate which model would work for what. Then we had Idea Generator that was helping us out in the flow of the book and the structure. We had a style amplifier that completely failed us, whereas you would think that a large language model is very good at stylometric types of tasks, right? And it's good at switching styles. And if you ask it to write for you a different idea of how to convey a meaning in that sentence, but actually in a more simple way, digestible to college students, that it would do a good job, and it just didn't. It would use this ChatGPT or other LLM lingo that is very specific to how these models structure text, and that was a complete failure. So we decided to do all the style by ourselves. But then what was quite interesting was actually the critic, which we just developed through a couple of prompts and one big meta prompt about the book and what we expect from it. And the critic was supposed to be very negative about our book, and a very experienced researcher, reviewer, who actually would not be pleased if the book got published. So it was providing chunk by chunk, piece by piece, actually, critique of each and every chapter. And I think that elevated the book really quite a lot, and it was very interesting for us. So that is something that we kept, and actually my whole research team now develops critics for all the things that we do, and they evaluate things before other people evaluate them. And I actually think this is quite a helpful and interesting avenue of using artificial intelligence. So what this example actually brings me to is the research work that we do. I told you and I have shown you, we are developing different types of assistants, and we're looking at how it feels sort of to work with them, but also to what extent that work is productive. And we already do have some evidence regarding productivity of work. There has been very interesting study that I'm sure you must have referred to, or it must be somewhere in the air, which is the Jagged Frontier. That's a research that is quite recent by Harvard Business School about how actually in organization, it is not the executives and it is not, lowest rank sort of, jobs that would benefit from artificial intelligence, but actually the medium, right? So the management, the managerial types of tasks, but also middle, in terms of hierarchies, those traditional hierarchies of organizations, the middle really benefits most. So it's an interesting effort. And in a similar line, actually, we have run a study where we were designing assistants based on generative AI. The study was called Cobots in the Knowledge Work, right? Cobots, collaborative robots. And there we saw, a 60% increase in job satisfaction of the participants of our study who were working with the assistant, mostly on marketing tasks, which is quite specific, but then also a 40% increase in job effectiveness. So for us, that was the first study that was taking us somewhere into an interesting avenue of how to work with artificial intelligence. And then we decided to actually push it a bit further. And we started developing another study that was based essentially on two theories of how a tool can be useful in particular tasks and how technology is essentially a very good edge for the organization as a whole, resource-based view and task technology fit. And here we developed a set of different hypotheses that you can see on the screen that were both related to sort of how the organization benefits through the usage of large-scale, adoption of large language models, but also how individual workers benefit if they are more familiar with AI. How does their work look like if they actually effectively tend to work with assistants? And we did do a separation because I think we have to now, in the context of artificial intelligence, really talk tasks, not necessarily jobs. Maybe work per se is also quite interesting, but for us, tasks are a very good approach to artificial intelligence because AI can be very useful in different types of setups, right? And here we had this division into simple and complex tasks, but also routine and creative tasks. Again, we were researching salespeople and marketers, and we decided to run this little scheme where we would classify different tasks and have a look at how people who were actually collaborating with AI were performing. So we had participants that were around 100, right? We still consider it a pilot study. And the participants were mostly quite senior, in what they were doing, and they were executive MBA program participants for the majority of them. That was true. We also decided to hire a panel of independent judges that were qualitatively assessing the job that these people were doing, both groups, the one that worked with AI and the one that didn't. And I received a question recently, why didn't you hire AI to actually assess the quality of the jobs? I guess it's an avenue, but we still decided to stick to people that were experienced marketers themselves. So for the hypothesis testing, for the one particularly regarding productivity, we saw quite interesting things here, right? So the group that actually collaborated with artificial intelligence had a major increase in productivity, and it's not measured through time. Actually, in time, we didn't see that much of a difference, but mostly in the quality of output. Then we also had a hypothesis that was looking at familiarity with artificial intelligence and how you would carry out the tasks that I was just showing you, right? And we did indeed see, very interesting correlations here regarding, no to moderate and significant familiarity with artificial intelligence and how, in fact, you were doing the tasks. I know that I'm rushing here, but I'm, running behind. So you could see that some effects were quite spectacular, whereas some others were sort of medium, right? But we did see in overall that this increase was there, and that whenever you were familiar with artificial intelligence, your gains would be actually higher for whichever task it was. And actually, throughout the study, maybe I'll mention, we did notice or spot one more thing that was very interesting for us. And that pertains to what I said about artificial intelligence being a very flexible tool. And that is that we were running conversational analysis. So you would have humans, the group that actually worked with the bot was talking to the bot quite a lot, obviously. And we saw interesting things in terms of certain vocabulary alignment, right? So we would see that AI would start to mirror how people who were talking to it were talking, which words they were using, how long they were talking as well. So it's a technology that actually has this possibility to adjust itself to your pace and your vocabulary. The only difference you can spot here is actually in mood. Mood, always worse for humans, better for artificial intelligence for some reasons, Maybe in the future it will be a way to check who's human and who is not. But indeed, that was one thing where we don't see alignment. Other than that, we saw quite a lot of it. So what we decided to embark on is another study. We were trying to understand how different personalities actually collaborate with AI. And for that purpose, we have used Big Five test. That I'm sure you know. We decided to entrust this one because it's a very well-validated psychological test. And we have decided to run this study on AI versus personality, where we don't look at tasks anymore and the type of collaboration that you choose based on tasks, but actually you look at, who people are, in fact, according to certain psychological standards and what are their preferences of working with artificial intelligence, which I think, again, is quite an interesting. The group was, again, recruited. It was a different group, mixed US and Poland as well, international, you could say. It was a marketing campaign very similar to the study one. And here we were, you can see some of our methodological aspects I know I have to run, but we were trying to understand, through different methods like ANOVAs and linear regressions, how is, personality related to your style of communication with AI and also ultimately your output. And for the Big Five test results, I just will mention two. I saw quite an interesting, thing here that I think really caters to certain ideas in neurodiversity as well. That people, for instance, who are neurotic would tend to use artificial intelligence as a proxy to the team, whereas people who are highly diligent would not delegate any task to AI, or rather supervise all of the tasks that they were, only to some extent delegating to artificial intelligence. And these results are not maybe surprising, but I think to some extent they're very interesting because they tell us that we have a flexible technology that can be adjusted somehow to the needs of the human, and ultimately this still brings a benefit both to the human and to the organization. And I know there are plenty of challenges with artificial intelligence, but I think this evidence actually shows that there's quite an interesting job that can be done if we keep this technology collaborative, right? Collaborative, in fact. So for us, this is, something that can be implemented in the future. And in fact, we have a spin-off, academic spin-off at Kosminski called Campus AI. And over there, we build AI assistants for reskilling and also collaborative AI assistants to kind of, train you for a particular task that you're doing. And I think there can be really developed a vast body of different projects that could also tell us more about how this approach to collaborative AI could benefit us as humans and our works and jobs. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Oh, I would have an accident with my back. Yes, also it was a very, very interesting, the last presentation, and thank you very much for sticking also to the time. First, I would like to give the floor to the participants if you have further questions to our speakers. Yes, please. You have the floor. She's coming to give you the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all the presenters. So my question is to do with Raphael's presentation. He touched on the issue of big data analytics. And I'm interested in knowing if there's any work that is being done at the ILO in harnessing big data to complement traditional surveys, such as the labor force surveys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Raphael.
Yeah, no, just briefly. Big data for labor statistics is quite a challenge. Yes, the ILO has been trying to zoom in the skills part, taking into consideration some data from particularly LinkedIn platform, and there has been quite a good example of how big data is being used in particularly in trying to combine these new forms with the labor force survey. Particularly, the other important use that we are envisaging is it's on the update the update of the International Classification of Occupations that are being used by in LFS intensively. We are exploring. We're actually using different tools in order to take big data and also artificial intelligence mechanisms like web scraping and AI tools in order to avoid having a very long period of updating of emerging, particularly new occupations and emerging occupations that are popping up in the world of work. So these are the examples that I can quote for you.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other question from the audience? Yes, I saw first the lady. Yes, there. Actually, there are two, and you can afterwards pass the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting panel this as well. Valeria Pugnano from KU Leuven. I have a question for the last presenter. I was very intrigued about the productivity raise. And probably I haven't captured that, but did you see any difference in the productivity if these tasks were complex, creative, so depending, because you presented a kind of mapping. Yeah. So was there a difference between complexity and simplicity of tasks and also creative and, the simple? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is a very interesting question. Actually, the differences were quite minor for the three tasks that I enumerated. So something that you would consider both complex and simple, but on the routine side, was performed much better with artificial intelligence. So say a task like competitors analysis, which is quite complex, was also we would note quite high increases in terms of productivity, similarly for routine and simple tasks. However, I think the least of a difference that we noted was actually in a task that was related to creating product names, which is something that can be done quite fast by humans. And here, actually, people working with the model quite often, in side comments, because we were doing also a post-test, would say that they felt limited by the model and the fact that the model would give them generic things. So instead, would choose to override it and based maybe on what it has prepared, still create something of their own. So we would see a less reliance on artificial intelligence in this particular task. And here also the differences between the group with no collaborator and the one with collaborator were quite minor. For the other tasks, they were solidly higher. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm Hanna Strzelecka. In the previous session, I had a presentation. I'd like to refer to the first presenter, to Elva. I really agree with you that you said that we need some standardized approach to green jobs and AI measures. I think also you presented some data about circular economy, about this is more and more appearing in different papers, but in fact, we as statisticians in official statistics, I really think that we suffer, that we see some data on green jobs, on circular economy, on different topics like AI, but we don't know what these data in fact mean, because different institutions cover different things. And I see that it is rather a comment of mine that we should, it is the next topic that we should think internationally, how to measure it in a harmonized way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Elva, you have the floor.
Thanks a lot for raising the issue. I think your point is extremely pertinent. I mean, it's not an easy task, it's not an easy endeavor. If you think about green jobs, maybe we could say, we could all agree that somebody building solar panels is working in a green activity. But then what about a lorry driver who carries and delivers solar panels and together with many other goods? So that's a discussion that it's ongoing. For us, it's still important to identify that, but then we need to understand where we draw the line and what is green, what is brown, what is gray as well. So very challenging task.
Thank you very much. I think there is another person. Yes, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Vincent Hardy, Statistics Canada. I was curious from the policy-making perspective, what was the perception on data quality? And if we think about digital platform employment, for example, the uncertainty that currently exists around the methods of collection that statistical agencies are implementing, and sort of the balance to find between providing information that's important for policymakers while being aware of the data quality limitations. And so perhaps my question is, what can statistical agencies do better in terms of communicating the uncertainties associated with data points? And from your perspective, how do you approach this challenge of potentially integrating uncertainty in terms of policymaking?
Thank you so much. Who is going to answer? Elva. Okay.
Since it is a question about policy making, I think we are aware of the challenges. A lot of work, and I think this will be also the basis of the discussion in the next panel, has been done behind the scenes to develop policy guidelines for the directive on platform work. But we are aware that the data collected for that was probably sufficient and necessary, but a lot needs to be developed around that. So I think the way we see that is that it's all a work in progress to get to standards that we see are not there yet. But waiting to achieve those standards, in order to act and take, political decisions and initiatives would be probably a mistake. So we go in parallel. We try to build standards, but at the same time, some actions have to be proposed and implemented.
Thank you, Elva. Now, Rafael would like to complement. Thanks.
Just complementing on the statistical side of that. I think it's an excellent question, because precisely policy making is driving the standard setting and statistical level, and the standard setting and statistical level is shedding light in the political negotiations. Beyond the European environment, we have also at the global level the tripartite discussions are on standards on digital work, and in particular digital platform workers, and it has a lot of implications affecting many of the global conventions and recommendations that are in place in the global labor market. So at this stage, the discussions are requiring a lot of new data and the new data is not there, but at least in some countries, and many countries even beyond the developed world, many things are being done in shaping this along the lines of the things that we have been discussing these days. So our role as a statistician is, of course, the communication, and to be very clear in what the standards that we have produced that help this process, particularly in these categories of workers that we have all been discussing these days, how to communicate well for the policymakers, and the policymakers can be using them well in a proper way. And this is a task that we have identified that is missing, that we have tried to, we had a dedicated discussions during the last ICLS precisely on how to communicate this to the policymakers. And the issue will be now to be getting very involved. And I think we have to, as statisticians, we have to be proactively being involved in the negotiations and being part of them in order to highlight the boundaries that we have in concepts that we have in everyday life vis-a-vis what is really measured and quantified and available for discussions. This, I think, is the way that statistical offices should go in tandem with the policymakers.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Any other? Yes, please. One more question. And yes, I would like also to pose a question if I have the time. Otherwise, during the break, I think.
Yeah,
so please.
It's a short question, I think. It's regarding the ISCO classification. Do you know when it will be finished, the new one?
Yeah, just well, the ISCO review has started already. There is a mandate that we received for the previous ICLS, not in the last one, in the previous one, to have it ready by the next ICLS, the 22nd. But the last ICLS in October has given us the green light to start the update, not waiting until 2028, but starting to create flexible ways of updating between different versions of ISCO. We cannot have the luxury of having 20 years between one version and the other one. And from now on, I think the trend will be to start developing a process where we can update it continuously, interim the different periods of proper new. But formally, we have to finish by 2028. It was supposed to be before the end of the 2030 round of censuses, on population censuses, that is in the 2030s.
Thank you very much. And also this goes also with the title of our topic, how the data collection and revision of ESCO classifications also can be aligned with the targets also by 2028 and by 2030 in total. So we heard, of course, and today and yesterday from several speakers the issues that exist and the gaps that, of course, exist and will be a part of the work of researchers in terms of alignment of the terminologies of the terms with respect to platform work, teleworking, cross-border teleworking. We have several terms and quantification is not fully aligned yet, of course. And so I think that this is one of the main questions that were raised, how the next steps would be developed in terms of this kind of alignment, because it's the base for the research and for the data collection across the countries. And I would like also to ask to Alexandra, because you referred to collaborative AI, and you made a hint. So what do you think, in your opinion, that the challenges are raised and will be raised, that in case that AI does not remain collaborative, how do you think that if you think that we should examine the risks already as of now?
Well, I would say it's not collaborative. The majority is not collaborative. In fact, what I am observing is a major form of simulation and persuading people that what is on the other side has affective states. I am talking about various newest versions of chatbots with clones of voices that carry certain emotional baggage, you know, and can persuade people that actually what is on the other side is not a statistical model. This is what I'm seeing. I'm not seeing a lot of collaborative AI and a conscious design to implement a tool for humans. I think what we have in terms of inventory are currently chatbots that you can converse with like you would with humans, and it has its good sides as well because we are used to this form of collaboration and conversation with others. But then, you know, when you look at the aspirations coming from the Silicon Valley, actually what I see is, you know, first of all, ambitions to build general artificial intelligence with unknown purpose to me, really, frankly speaking. Second of all, more and more of a push to create a full simulation for humans that, you know, that what's on the other side is to some extent conscious. And I feel that actually the paradigm that we're trying to push for is a minority case. That's why I think, you know, I'm glad that we have some regulatory framework here in Europe that would at least allow us to discern deepfakes from, or AI-generated content from something that is actually, you know, human output. But I would say it's the first step. Now we have to move a bit further, put some more emphasis on explainability, put more emphasis on other types of designs that are not only going to be, I think, in terms of value, closer to or more aligned with what we would want to have, but also can be more productive as tools in real environments, can translate into productivity, but also sense of agency and control. So I think there's a big job ahead of us and yeah, quite many tasks. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So if we don't have any kind of... yes, please. The last of the last, I think, and then we need to break.
I was wondering if you saw workers who were uncomfortable with AI becoming more comfortable over time, and whether you had suggestions for training that could help workers be more comfortable and productive?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. What we saw, because I did not mention due to lack of time, in the research that we did not develop just a general, like, you know, type of assistant that you already know, like where you are asking or prompting the model to do something and it does that immediately. Sometimes of poor quality, sometimes of good quality. Instead, we've designed a very much a dialogue-oriented assistant that would ask you additional questions, whether it understood your task better, whether it's done a good job, you know, or present to you even 2 or 3 versions of the output where you could select from that, which in our mind was elevating agency of humans in that task doing. It's not that you just delegate task to AI, instead you are involved with that task. So what we saw, and also in the post-test, that is what we checked for, was greater sense of agency and control on the human side. However, I think in order to expand on that and to really answer your question, we would have to do a longitudinal study, which is our plan.
Okay, thank you so much, all participants of this panel, and also for your valuable questions. Please, if you could upload also this panel, and thank you so much. And we are going to have a break. Christina, maybe you share more details on that. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, we have now a technical break. It will be about 15 minutes, and in that time, here the organizers, the people behind the scene will change the scene. So maybe be careful in not being in their way, so that we can start quickly with the next session. Normally in 15 minutes, you will hear jingles and all that. But okay.